The air in the top-floor conference room of the Meridian Tower was thin, filtered, and smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. I sat in a sleek, ergonomic chair that cost more than my first car, my fingers tracing the cold edge of my laptop. On the massive 98-inch 4K screen at the front of the room, my life's work was being dissected by men who didn't know the difference between a back-end server and a toaster. My father, Robert, stood by the screen, looking every bit the silver-haired titan of industry. He gestured broadly to a diagram of a neural mesh architecture, a system I had spent 3 years perfecting in the dead of night. "It's a masterpiece of efficiency," Robert beamed, his voice echoing with a warmth that felt like a physical lie. "And I'm proud to say it was built entirely by my son." Tyler spent years in the trenches, coding every logic gate, every security layer, every line of this platform. He is the technical heart of Prism logic. I froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I wasn't his son. I was his daughter, Luna. And Tyler? My younger brother Tyler didn't know how to open a command prompt without a YouTube tutorial. But there he was, sitting next to our father, nodding with a modest, rehearsed smile as the potential buyers, a consortium of Silicon Valley's heaviest hitters, looked at him with genuine awe. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just a partner. I was a ghost. A ghost they had used to build a throne, and now they were exorcising me before the gold started raining down. The betrayal didn't start in that boardroom, it started 5 years ago with a promise made over a kitchen table. I had just finished my master's in computer science, and Robert had come to me with a vision. "Luna, you have the brain, and I have the reach," he told me. "We'll build a family legacy. A 50-50ths partnership. Equal equity, equal credit. You build the engine, I'll build the road." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. For 5 years, I worked myself into the ground. I lived on black coffee and adrenaline. While other women my age were out at brunch or traveling, I was staring at a flickering monitor until 3 a.m., hunting for memory leaks and optimizing data flow. I wrote the core algorithms. I designed the modular API. I filed the patents. I was the quiet one. The technical one. Tyler, meanwhile, had spent those 5 years finding himself, which mostly involved expensive vacations and a mid-level sales job he barely showed up for. But Robert always said Tyler was the face of the family. I didn't mind, until I realized the face was being grafted onto my brain. The first confrontation. After the meeting ended and the investors filed out, I followed Robert into his private office. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Dad, why did you tell them Tyler built Prism?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay professional. "I built every single line of that code. Every diagram on that screen was mine." Robert didn't even look up from his phone. He was already checking the stock futures. "Luna, honey, don't be so sensitive. It's about optics. Investors in this climate want a certain profile. They want a charismatic male founder. It's a narrative, that's all. It sells the company for 10 times what it's worth. Optics." I felt a surge of cold fury. "I spent 5 years in a basement making you a millionaire. We had a deal. 50-50ths. He finally looked at me, and his expression wasn't one of guilt, it was irritation. "Look, I'm bringing in a $50 million acquisition. Tyler has the it factor. He's confident, he's social. You're technical. You're great at your job, Luna, but you're an employee. Tyler is the legacy. He'll be the one the press writes about." The door opened, and Tyler walked in, smelling of expensive bourbon. He'd heard the whole thing. I looked at him, waiting for him to defend me, to say, "Dad, stop, Luna did the work." Instead, he just shrugged and leaned against the doorframe. "Come on, sis. You knew how this worked. You're the nerd behind the curtain. I'm the guy on the stage. You should be happy, we're about to be rich." I looked at the desk. There was a draft of the new corporate structure. Tyler's name was listed as co-founder and chief technology officer. My name was nowhere to be found. I was listed under general engineering staff. They weren't just taking my credit, they were erasing my existence. The weeks that followed were a slow-motion car crash of humiliation. I was systematically excluded from every important meeting. One afternoon, I received a call from Vaudor, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. "Ms. Chen, we're calling to confirm the cancellation of your seat for the founders' dinner tonight." "I didn't cancel anything," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "Oh, a Mr. Tyler Chen called yesterday. He said you had a technical emergency and wouldn't be able to make the social event. The rest of the party is still confirmed." I hung up and walked straight to the break room where Tyler was holding court with some of the junior staff. "Why was I cancelled from the dinner, Tyler?" He didn't even blink. "The buyers wanted to keep it casual, high-level strategy only. You would have been bored anyway. It was all golf talk and vision. Not your scene." Then came the Sunday dinners at home. My mother, oblivious or perhaps complicit in the family delusion, would dote on Tyler. My uncle Marcus, a small-time investor himself, would ask about the genius architecture of Prism. "It's all about the modular scalability," Tyler would say, repeating phrases I had taught him like a parrot. "Luna helps out with the typing, doesn't she, Robert?" Uncle Marcus would ask, chuckling. "She's a great support system," my father would say, patting my hand. "Every king needs a scribe." My mother would chime in, "Luna, don't look so sour. It's not ladylike to be jealous of your brother's success. Be happy for the family." I sat there, invisible at my own table, eating a meal paid for by the software I had built, listening to them discuss a future that didn't include me. That was the night I realized that family was just a word they used to keep me compliant. What they didn't know, what they had completely forgotten, was that I wasn't just a coder. I was a scientist. And scientists document everything. From day one, I had kept a meticulous archive. I had backups of every version of the code, time-stamped and digitally signed. I had every email thread where I had explained the technology to my father because he couldn't understand the basics. But most importantly, I had the intellectual property filings. When I first started building the core engine, I had been the one to fill out the patent applications. Robert had been too busy networking to read the fine print. I had listed myself as the sole inventor. The company had a license to use the IP, but the ownership remained with me personally, a small detail buried in a mountain of paperwork that my father's cut-rate lawyers had missed. I reached out to an old contact, Elena Maria, a ferocious tech litigator I'd met at a conference. We met in a dimly lit library. I showed her the files. "Luna," she said, her eyes widening as she scrolled through my documentation. "They didn't just break a promise. They committed massive fraud. If they try to sell this company without your consent as the IP holder, they're committing a felony." "I don't want to just sue them," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I want to show the investors exactly what they're buying." The acquisition was set to close in 3 weeks. The final presentation, the technical deep dive, was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. This was the moment where the buyers would do their final due diligence before wiring the $50 million. My father told me I could attend, but only as support. "Stay in the back, Luna," he told me that morning. "If they have a technical question Tyler can't handle, just whisper the answer to him. Let him shine. It's his big day." I wore a black suit that felt like armor. I arrived with Elena Maria, who was dressed in a sharp blazer and carrying a briefcase that looked like it held a bomb. We sat in the very last row. Tyler stood at the front, clicking through my slides. He looked confident. He looked charismatic. He looked like a fraud. "Our system uses a proprietary load balancing algorithm," Tyler told the room, gesturing to a complex flowchart I had drawn. "I designed it to handle 10 million concurrent users without a single millisecond of lag." One of the lead investors, a woman named Sarah Vance known for her sharp tongue, leaned forward. "Interesting. Can you explain how you handled the race conditions in the distributed ledger? And why did you choose this specific encryption salt?" Tyler's smile faltered. He looked like a deer in headlights. "Well, the salt, it's about security. We prioritized the user experience." Robert tried to jump in. "What Tyler means is..." "I'd like Tyler to answer," Sarah Vance said, her eyes narrowing. "It's his architecture, isn't it?" Tyler began to sweat. He looked toward the back of the room, toward me, silently begging for a whisper, a hint, a lifeline. I didn't whisper. I stood up. "He can't answer that, Ms. Vance," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Because he didn't write the encryption. He didn't design the ledger. He doesn't even know what a race condition is." The room went deathly silent. My father's face turned a brilliant, dangerous shade of red. "Luna, sit down. This is a family matter." "No, Dad," I said, walking toward the front. "This is a business matter." Elena Maria stood up and opened her laptop, connecting it to the secondary display. "My name is Elena Maria, and I represent Luna Chen, the sole intellectual property owner of the Prism Logic platform." The screen behind Tyler changed. It didn't show marketing fluff. It showed the commit logs. Luna Chen, 47,890 lines of code. Tyler Chen, 0 lines of code. It showed the patent filings. Primary inventor, Luna Chen. Secondary inventor, none. It showed the partnership agreement from 5 years ago, highlighted in red where it promised 50% equity and full credit. "What the hell is this?" Sarah Vance demanded, standing up and closing her laptop with a loud snap. "It's a fraud," I said, looking my father in the eye. "My father and brother have spent the last 6 months attempting to sell you technology they have no legal right to transfer. I am the sole owner of the core algorithms. And I am formally revoking Prism Logic's license to use them, effective immediately." The chaos was magnificent. The investors didn't even wait for my father to respond. They gathered their things and walked out. The $50 million deal didn't just stall, it disintegrated in 48 hours. The legal fallout was a hurricane. Because they had made false statements in their SEC filings and acquisition disclosures, Robert and Tyler were staring at massive fines and potential criminal charges for fraud. My father tried to play the family card one last time. He came to my apartment, looking aged and broken. "Luna, how could you do this? We're your blood. You've ruined your brother's life. He can't even get a job as a barista now." "I didn't ruin him, Dad," I said, standing in my doorway. "I just stopped lying for him. You told me I was an employee. Well, this employee just took her tools and went home. You wanted a legacy? Well, you have one now. You're the man who tried to rob his own daughter." I didn't just walk away with nothing. I negotiated a settlement. To avoid a massive, public lawsuit that would have landed them both in prison, Robert was forced to liquidate his remaining assets to pay me $20 million for the IP rights, not to keep the company, but just so I wouldn't testify in the fraud investigation. 6 months later, the name Prism Logic was a joke in the tech world. Robert retired in disgrace, and Tyler moved to another state to try and reinvent himself, though I hear he's mostly just spending what's left of his inheritance. I, however, didn't stop. I used my $20 million to launch Astra Systems. On the day of my launch, I received a call. It was Sarah Vance, the investor from that fateful meeting. "Luna," she said. "I didn't call because of the drama. I called because I've spent the last 6 months looking at the code you wrote. It's the best I've ever seen. I want to lead your series of funding. Under one condition," I said. "Name it. My name is on the door. My name is on the patents. And if anyone ever tries to tell you a son built this, you tell them a daughter did it better." I stood in my new office, overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the floor. For 5 years, I had worked in the dark, building someone else's dream. Now, the lights were on. My name was everywhere. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't a ghost. I was the architect. And the world finally knew my name. If this story stirred something inside you, don't scroll away in silence. Tap like, it tells us these stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to Vengeful Goddess for unforgettable tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice, stories you won't hear anywhere else. Turn on the bell icon, so the next story reaches you the moment it drops. Your support keeps these voices alive. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud, being heard is.